Thank you, thank you. I'll be here all week. No, I literally will be here all week because I have to find room on my shelves for all of those. And welcome back to another video. Or should I say welcome back to another slightly unhinged video as we tumble down the well to the end of the year where all of the statistics live, including how many books your girl bought during the year versus how many she's actually read. Because some moron put that on a bingo board challenge somewhere for the world to see. And by the world I mean the inside of her own head. There's no judgment scarier than your own judgment, kids. Like seriously, if there's one thought that I'm leaving you with this year, it's that nobody thinks about you as badly as you think about you. Literally nobody. Which means, in my not so humble opinion, that you should start talking to yourself a little more nicely. Start being a little gentler with yourself for 2024. Living well doesn't mean winning. It just means doing a little bit better than you did last time. I did not expect the last book haul of the year to get quite so philosophical, but here we are. Or rather, here we are. Finally emptying this cart. Come to mummy, my pretty. Yes, that's right. You may have noticed in the last couple of videos that your girl once again does actually have a book cart. That's partly because my shop's been closed for most of 2023, so I don't need this for packing orders. Also partially because my bingo board in 2023 really did kind of highlight for me my book buying habits. And so for the first time in a really long time, all of my book buying for the last couple of months can actually fit on one cart. And both me and my little stingray pals that live on it are real happy about that. Because not only does that mean that I can probably fit all of these books into one video without you having to take a nap break in the middle, but it also means that for the first time in a really long time, my book buying is actually quantifiably completely under control. Who is she? Never met her. And realistically, having this book cart here is also great for practical reasons because it means I can just start from the top down, and not having to use my brain excessively much at this time of the year really suits me as a lifestyle choice. So without further ado, before the winter sunlight makes me fully look like the ghost of Christmas past, let's get started. So the first book on my to haul cart is 17 by Jo Gibson, and it is very much as it says on the tin. It is a coming of age story. It is a memoir. This memoir is set in 1992 when Jo Gibson was 17. He was, like many other boys his age, slightly concerned about his education and getting to university, but mostly concerned about, you know, like girls and music and hanging out with his friends and all of the other things that you do when you're 17 and you don't have to think about the future yet. But it was at that point in his school life that one of Jo's female teachers, who was herself in her early 30s, started to take a rather keen interest in him, and that interest ultimately turned into a relationship of coercive control, wherein society was kind of telling Jo that this is exactly what he should want, right? It is the original MILF American Pie fantasy, having your attractive older teacher want you above all of the other boys in your school. But of course, in reality, the experience of a relationship like this is absolutely nothing like the fantasy that Jo was sold. I am really interested to see how this book is written because, of course, in the wake of Me Too especially, there were a lot of memoirs that came out from people who identified as female predominantly about coercive control relationships and abuse that happened behind closed doors. But I very rarely see that memoir coming from anybody who identifies as cis male. And as you can see, there is actually a bookmark in it at the moment because I do have intentions of starting it really soon. Predominantly because things that go on my memoir shelf tend to get swallowed up by that shelf and I might not see them again for a while. The next book from my trolley might be one that gives you a little bit of deja vu if you watched, I think, the last haul that I did on my channel, because I also hauled a copy of this book in that video, and that book is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. Now, in case you are unfamiliar with this season, because I see that most people these days really do think about Samantha Shannon and The Priory of the Orange Tree as one and the same thing, and there are quite a lot of people who came to her through Priory who haven't actually checked out this series yet. So in case you need a little refresher, The Bone Season is a sort of futuristic, semi-sci-fi, semi-urban fantasy series in which we follow Paige Mahoney while she navigates the world of the Scion. This one is also an alternative history, and in this world, Scion is a totalitarian government, and it is a government that is dedicated to getting rid of clairvoyance and basically anybody who is not just a normal person in this world. But then one day while travelling home to her father's flat, Paige gets stuck in a situation in which she can't do anything except for use her powers and she is then hunted down by the Scion government and thrown in a labour camp. And it is while in this camp that Paige realises that the world is not entirely as it has been sold to her. Now, there are multiple reasons why everybody is talking about this series right now. One, because Samantha Shannon has become a very popular author over the last couple of years. Two, because this is actually the 10th anniversary republication of the Bone season in hardback, and much like the Diviners series, there is not to date one single publication of this series with completely matching covers, but also because in a kind of landmark move, Samantha Shannon has been allowed by her publishers to completely revise this edition and the subsequent editions of the Bone season series. The Broken Binding have committed to publishing an entire set of hardbacks which all match this one, all with these sprayed end pages. Because it's a special edition, they do of course also have end papers and a completely foiled cover, spine and back. And is this series going to be ridiculously expensive for me to recollect in these special hardbacks? Yes. But do I want a matching hardback set of this series more than maybe any other book on my shelves for 2024? Also yes. And that's just where I find myself at this point in my life. Next up, we have a book that I am incredibly excited about. This one was a complete cover buy. I was browsing in Waterstones, I spotted it and I was like, that looks sexy. And then I read the title and I was like, I don't care what the blurb says, I am buying this. As long as I read the first 2 pages and they don't completely suck, I am buying this. And reader, they did not suck. They were in fact phenomenal. And so funny that I wanted to just stand there in the shop and continue reading. But I did not. I brought it back, and the it I'm talking about is the Scandalous Confessions of Lydia, Bennet, Witch by Melinda Taub. How amazing is this cover, right? And I felt like spotting this on the shelf without knowing it was coming out or knowing anything about it was kind of serendipitous, considering that this is also the year that I finally picked up The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow, when it had sat on my shelf for multiple years, and it ended up being one of my favourite books of 2023. Another Pride and Prejudice retelling from another sister who is not Jane or Lizzie. Give it to me. If you have read Pride and Prejudice, you will know that Lydia Bennet is the youngest of the Bennet sisters. She is full of foolishness and boys, and she makes what seems on the surface for herself and her family like a very bad choice in Pride and Prejudice that a lot of people have to come together to save her from. But in this one, we pick up with Lydia after she has made that choice, and we hear things from her words, because this is essentially her diary, in which she finally confesses that she is in fact a witch, and that is the thing that her family don't like about her more than anything else. And oh, by the way, history might know that Jane, Lizzie, Mary, Kitty and Lydia exist, but the record books actually show that there were more Bennet children, and that their story is much darker and more tragic. I am so pumped for this, but I am also worried that it could go the way of The Other Bennet Sister and end up just landing on my shelves and becoming a rainy day book that I'm intimidated by, because I'm so excited for it. My patrons are currently picking my January 2024 TBR for me through a series of polls for each of the squares on my bingo board, and I have added this book to one of the polls, so we'll see. Maybe I will end up reading it in January. Now, next up, we've got a book that I don't really need to tell you guys very much about. It is the new Percy Jackson books, Percy Jackson and the Chalice of the Gods. In this one, Ganymede, who is the cupbearer of the gods, loses his golden chalice, and of course, Percy has to find it. It is not just any old quest, it is one of the 3 quests that Percy needs to complete in order to get a letter of recommendation to go to university. Now, of course, this is not just a Percy Jackson book, this is a Percy Jackson and the Olympians book, which is not the original series of 5, but an addition to the second series of 5, which your girl never finished. So there is a very good chance that a Percy Jackson reread is heading my way in 2024, which is good for the reread square on my bingo board, and potentially pretty good for my reading numbers for 2024, because the Percy Jackson books have never exactly been difficult to eat my way through, because it is in my hands earlier than it should be. It is in fact in everybody's hands earlier than it should be, as far as I'm aware, and I'm guessing that the reason for that is because this one wasn't embargoed, and so when it popped into Waterstones and all of the other bookshops, they popped it out on their shelves in time for the Christmas sales, because as far as I'm aware, this one wasn't supposed to come out until the end of January, start of February. But oh no, I have it early, how sad. The book that I am I'm talking about is, of course, Heather Fawcett's Emily Wilde and the Map of the Other Lands, which is the second in the Emily Wilde series. For those of you keeping score with my 2023 bingo board, you will know that the first book in this series was actually a read-aloud book with myself and lovely spouse Harry, and we completely adored it. We loved reading it together, and we will be reading this one aloud together also. So I don't really want to give a blurb for this one necessarily, because I think it will spoil some of the things that you get in the first book. So instead I will tell you about the first book in this series, in which we meet Emily Wilde, who is a scholar working on a book about fairies and the fae. She has travelled around the world to study and write encyclopedia articles on all of the different fae that exist out there, and in the first book we follow her as she goes to the very last location that she needs for her encyclopedia, which is quite a dangerous area in this world to go to. The fae that she has gone to try and study are some of the most elusive fae out there, and there's kind of a reason why nobody has ever completed a work on them. But while she is there getting ready for her expedition, she is joined by a colleague that she would really rather see the back of. Wendell Bambleby stumbles into the middle of her carefully curated, very calm expedition and turns everything on its end, and they spend the next like 200 odd pages bitching vociferously at each other, and I love it so much. Next up we have The Pomegranate Gate by Ariel Kaplan. This is another beautiful sprayed edges edition, and this one is a little bit of an odd purchase for me because it is a historical fantasy, which is typically not something that I pick up much of, but it is something that my lovely friend Becca has become absolutely obsessed with recently, and she's talked about this one quite a lot, so I decided to give it a try because the Venn diagram of our fantasy taste is quite closely aligned in most cases. So from what I understand, this book follows the journey of a group of Jews who have been displaced because of religious persecution, and specifically in this world we are following two people with their own secrets in this convoy, Toba and Naphtali. But while this convoy is already in serious danger and they are physically on the run, Toba walks through a forest and through a gate, and this gate takes her into a world that looks just like her own, but is a parallel of hers in every way. And I think that Naphtali then has to find her using a book which is mentioned in the blurb that Naphtali carries but is never able to read. Now, would I necessarily have picked this up on my own, under my own steam? Probably not, but do I trust Becca's recommendations? Usually. So I shall report back and we shall see if she got it right again. Now, the next one that we have from my trolley is, I think, the last book from my locked library subscription. And before I show you the book, I want to talk to you a little bit about why it is the last book in my subscription. So you guys know the Locked Library is a subscription that I pay for myself, that I was extremely excited when it debuted, because the Locked Library was originally advertised as an adult fantasy subscription box. So guys, I have nothing against and am more than happy if you love YA fantasy and romantasy books, but personally I've had enough of YA fantasy subscription boxes, and I was excited that there was going to be an adult one finally. But because the Locked Library books are coming from a publisher and not a curation service like Fairy Loot, there was always the possibility that that publisher was just going to push whatever was their newest, best big release, and it turns out that the books that they wanted to be popular were predominantly YA fantasy and romantasy releases, which is why I have cancelled the service, because it started out as, oh, this is just going to be adult books, and then it slowly turned into, well, we'll sometimes have YA books, and now it is predominantly we only have YA books. And on top of all of that, one of the promises they made at the start of this subscription was that the books in this subscription were not going to be featured anywhere else. And while exclusivity is not necessarily something that I'm massively interested in, I want special editions because I like the special editions, because I want shiny editions of my favourite books, not because I want to have an exclusive edition that nobody else has. But when you are being promised and sold exclusivity, when that is literally part of the branding for this box, and then midway you pivot and one of your books is featured in another subscription service, it's just bad PR, my guys. So I am off ski, guys, and the September book is the last book that you're gonna see featured in any of my hauls, and unsurprisingly enough, it it is a YA book. This is Every Exquisite Thing by Laura Stephen, and it is a Dorian Gray dark academia retelling. And that's as much as I know about it, because I don't genuinely know whether I'm going to give this one a go or not. So yeah, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. Next up, we've got another book that was on my most anticipated list for 2023, and that is The Vampires of El Notre by Isabel Canas. Isabel Canas also wrote The Hacienda, and I love this brand of gothic historical horror. So this one is set in the 1840s, and it follows Nina, who is the daughter of a rancher. She lives on a farm when her farm is attacked by vampires. And this farm is attacked for the second time because Nina has already been attacked by these creatures once when she was 9 years old. She is now considered to be missing, presumed dead. We then follow Nestor, who is a ranch hand who, now that he believes that Nina is dead, is just kind of running as far away from the memory of that night as he possibly can, moving from ranch to ranch. But then the United States invade Mexico in 1846, and Nestor joins the army. And whilst in the army, he is brought to a camp where he sees Nina again. Nestor is absolutely horrified to discover that all this time Nina was alive and he didn't know. And Nina is meanwhile absolutely raging at Nestor because she believes that she was literally left for dead, that he abandoned her. But the two of them have no choice but to sort out their issues pretty quickly, because those same creatures that attacked Nina all that time ago have been following her, and they are very much back on the horizon. Isabel Canas's books are just absolutely stunning, but they are also this like scratchy matte cover, which it makes that itch scratching spot in the back of my brain very happy. Next up, we have got a book that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but it is a book that my lovely friend Jill recommended to me. We have a very big overlap in our Venn diagrams, do Jill and I. And one of the things that we particularly love are soft boys being soft with each other. And so she recommended to me In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. And there are numerous reasons why I wouldn't normally have picked this up on my own. For a start, it is a World War II story. And for a second, it is a queer World War II story, which generally don't end very well. And I have a huge problem with particularly literary and historical fiction using queer romance as this big epic tragedy landscape, and forgetting that in that queer joy also needs to exist, and also kind of forgetting that it's okay to allow a queer story to end well. But knowing all of my reservations, Jill still put this into my hands and went, no, you will love it. And so here it is. So this one is about two men, Henry Gaunt and Sidney Elwood, who at the beginning of this, when the war kicks off, are quite happily away from the world in a pretty idyllic boarding school, which is definitely a setting that I am bowled over by. I will 100% buy all the way into that. But when the war happens, these boys find themselves in two very different states of mind. Henry's mother is German, that side of the family are German, and so she begs Henry to enlist in the army to kind of save the entire family from being accused of any anti-British sentiment. But when Henry gets to the front, he realises the realities of war, how horrific it is at the front, and he begs Sidney not to join him. But Sidney doesn't want to be parted with him at all, ever, and so he enlists and finds himself also in the trenches. The blurb then says, once in the trenches, Elwood and Gaunt find fleeting moments of solace in each other, but their friends are all dying in front of them, and at any moment they could be next. I am really hopeful, given the things that Jill has additionally told me about this that I cannot tell you guys because they are mild spoilers, that this book is going to be completely up my alley and that I am going to be absolutely obsessed. Next up, another book that I hope that I am completely obsessed with, and one from a subscription that is actually doing what it promised to do. This is the October Evernight book, which is an Illumicrate quarterly horror subscription. I am delighted, not only with the choice that they have made, but also with the customizations in this book. So the original cover for this book looks like this. This one is entirely different and the customizations are amazing. I absolutely love this cover. The sprayed edges are great, but the end papers, oh my god. Are we seeing this? And I love that under the dust jacket we've gone with like a chalky white finish instead of foil for a change. And so far Beth has read this and absolutely loved it, and a couple of my patrons have read this and absolutely loved it. So it is very far up on my list. So this is about Dr. Tamsin Rivers. She is a scientist and her entire job is to look into the cause of subsidence in this city and to find out why it's happening and why it's happening so rapidly. So she's very much there in her little basement experiment room alone, and in her opinion sitting pretty at the top of her profession. She is described as arrogant in the blurb of this book. You are not supposed to like this character, and I kind of like that straight up too. Like, I kind of like just being told this girl's a bitch and then being slowly brought around to root for her. But while she is in this basement room doing experiments, a door opens up that she didn't expect, a door which wasn't there before, and beyond this door there are strange and puzzling dimensions. And then one night this door opens and behind it is an exact doppelganger of Tamsin, except that she is everything that Tamsin is not. She's sweet and kind and funny, where Tamsin is very much not a people person and doesn't need to be liked. The blurb says at the end, with her employer growing increasingly suspicious, Tamsin must try to hold herself together long enough to figure out what her double wants from her and just where the mysterious door leads. Tell me that I am not going to be reading this in the depths of winter during January. But if you tell me it, you'll be wrong, because I absolutely am. Next up is a book that I'm not going to give you guys a synopsis for. I'm just going to show you how pretty it is, because I have talked about it quite a lot recently, both when I hauled the proof of it and then in the subsequent TBR, and also I think in a vlog where I read it. And that book is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. We know that Once and Future Witches is one of my favourite books of all time, so I was going to snap this up as soon as it came out. This is just the standard edition of this one, but I think it's glorious. I love the purple under the dust jacket. If you love Once and Future Witches, if you love haunted houses, and if you love the kind of modern take on the gothic genre, then this is definitely a book that you are going to enjoy. And then finally at the end of this row, talking about my lovely friend Jill, we have a book that she actually unhauled and passed on to me. She knows how much I absolutely adore Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It's one of my favourite books in the world. Again, keeping very much on that like gothic psychological suspense train that we've been on with the last couple of books. And she also knows that I am of the opinion that there hasn't been an edition of Rebecca which has actually really completely matched the mood of the book for me. And so while she was moving recently, she was doing a big unhaul, and one of the books that she decided to unhaul was this beautiful edition. This is the Virago Modern Classics Naked Hardbacks. There is a whole series of these which have kind of like graphically designed covers, and the graphics tie into the time that the book was written in and the mood of the book, and this one very much does make me think of like a print that you would have found in Manderley somewhere. It's just absolutely beautiful and in pristine unread condition, because Jill really doesn't want to read this book, which makes me sad in my heart, but the hype train has definitely hit her hard and she is just like turned off by all mentions of it. So maybe I'll try again in 10 years. But in the meantime, I think this one is definitely prime for my reread square on my bingo board. Next up, we have got a book by an author who is fast becoming one of my favourite authors of all time. This is Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. And when I say that Ashley Winstead's books are dark, like dark, I really mean it, and I love it here. I was going to buy this anyway, like this was inevitable to end up on my haul cart, but then I discovered that it is set in Louisiana, and I cannot tell you how fast I clicked that pre-order button. This one is about Ruth Collier. She is a preacher's daughter in a dead-end town in Louisiana, and she pretty much hates her life. But there are things lurking out there in this small town that people are more afraid of than the fire and brimstone that her preacher father rains down from his church pulpit every Sunday. And she's semi-interested in those things. But when a skull with weird etched carvings on it is discovered in the town, for some reason suspicion falls on Ruth's best friend Everett. They've been best friends for a really long time. Ruth sees Everett, but she's not sure that Everett sees her. Regardless of their its complicated status, however, they are going to have to find out very quickly where the skull came from in order to clear Everett's name, because a town that is gripped by fear and suspicion can turn very quickly. This one is only 380 pages and Ashley Winstead, I need more. I need more from you. I need longer books, girl. Please, can you just give me longer books? Why can't you just have everything that you want in the world? It's so mean. Oh, second from last, we have another book that is The Fault of Jill, actually, and this one is a true crime book, which I am so excited about because I did not know that it existed. And that's rare for me. New true crime books don't usually happen when I'm not looking. Honestly guys, it absolutely delights me when you guys or friends tell me about books that I know that I'm gonna absolutely love and I just had no idea that they existed, because it's so hard doing what I do to not know about books. Like, there are so few blind cover buys in the genres that I like these days. It's very nice to have one just land on my lap that I know that I'm gonna like. So this is Behold the Monster by Gillian Lauren. Gillian Lauren at the beginning of this book is a mystery thriller author who is doing research in order to make the book that she is writing more realistic. But she had absolutely no idea at the beginning of this process that she was going to end up in exactly the kind of book that she was writing herself. Because in the process of doing this, Gillian Lauren ended up coming into contact with the serial killer Samuel Little. He was a not very much reported on serial killer. He wasn't one of the ones that captured the nation's imagination, and that was because a lot of the people who Samuel Little had killed had not been identified, and there were many cases out there which had question marks on them as to whether they were victims of him in the first place. But through months and months of letters and interviews with him, and then painstaking research going through all of the little nuggets that he would give her in these interviews, Gillian Lauren absolutely blew the top off of this case, because this page is a list of Samuel Little's victims, both identified and not identified, going all the way from 1971 to 2005, and law enforcement knew about less than a third of these going into this investigation. So desperate to get to this one before it goes on my shelves and just gets consumed by my non-fiction shelves, which is definitely something we're gonna have to talk about a little bit more in 2023 for both the book buying and the bingo board side of things. Because although I read a lot of non-fiction in 2023, I also bought a lot of non-fiction, and my non-fiction shelves, percentage wise compared to all of the other shelves in my house, is the lowest percentage of read to owned books. We might have to do some work on that. Yes. And then last up on this list is actually a thrifted book by an author that I love that I did not know existed. This is The House of Glass by Susan Fletcher. I found this randomly in an Amnesty International bookshop. I spotted Susan Fletcher's name on the spine of this book and I snatched it up. Susan Fletcher is of course the author of Eve Green, which is one of my favourite books of all time. It is the book that I consistently tell you guys that although I love opinions and I want you to tell me when your opinion is different from my opinion in books, I love hearing it. I don't want anybody's opinion on that book because it just happened at a time in my life that was perfect and my memories of it are perfect, and Susan Fletcher's writing is perfect. And so when I discovered this, a gothic mystery, guys, a gothic mystery which sounds on the back very much along the lines of The Black Feathers by Rebecca Netley, which I've just read, and again which you guys know that I have absolutely adored. I love Rebecca Netley. I snapped it up immediately, and it's in truly remarkable condition, and it suggests to me that it's never been read, which is a little bit shady considering that there's an inscription in it to Alison with best wishes from a friend whose name I can't really make out. But Alison, you shady. You never read this book, did you, girl? You just unhauled it. Don't worry, Alison's friend. I'm gonna do the good deed for you. I am gonna read this book and I am probably gonna love it. So this is the only one on this list that I'm just gonna read you the synopsis of because I really didn't know anything about this book before it popped up. Weirdly, Susan Fletcher's books have been renamed in different territories and republished throughout the years with different names, and I don't really understand why it's happened, but I think that that has definitely happened with this one. So the back of the book says 1914. Clara Waterfield, 20 years old and newly bereaved, is summoned to a large stone house in rural Gloucestershire. Her task, to fill a glass house with exotic plants from Kew Garden to create a private paradise for the owner of Shadowbrook. But on arrival she hears dark rumours. Flowers are dying in their vases, curious marks appear on doors, and the maids seem nervous, afraid. Who lived at Shadowbrook before, and who is living there now? Well, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out, even if Alison will never know. So that is it, guys. That is my entire last book haul for 2023, you will note that there are quite a few books on this list, and it is liable to massively skew my percentage of read to hauled books in 2023 for my bingo board. And that's why you don't see any best of or stats videos from me until the start of the year, because I literally never know what's going to happen in the month of December. So keep your eyes peeled for the video in January coming with the stats and the roundup for my 2023 bingo board. And in case you haven't already seen it, I have already launched my 2024 bingo board. You can go and watch that video here, and down below in the description there are copies of the board there that you can use for yourself, where you can either change the percentages and numbers, you can change the prompts, or you can come up with an entirely new board for you. There is a blank version there and a guidebook also about how to do that. So if you too fancy being one of the many people who are jumping on the bingo board from Hell Journey in 2024, then take yourself over to that video. As always, please tell me if you have read and loved any of the books that are on my list here today, or if you have hated them, because we do love opinions, except on Eve Green. And as always, if there are any books that you think that I would love based on the books that I have picked up here today, then please tell me about those too. If you have got all the way through this video, then leave me a Christmas related emoji down below, as these books are my last Christmas present to myself in 2023. If you are new to my channel and you would like to find out how I get on with some of these in 2024, particularly the more controversial ones that I am side-eyeing, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below. And if you are a returning viewer of my channel who is also side-eyeing my percentages after this book haul, then don't forget to like that video down below, because it really does help my channel. And I will speak to you guys really soon. Bye!